All right, it's the question that every Angel fan asks this time of year. Are the Halos going to be a playoff team next season? How do we know? How can we tell? What is a playoff team? And are the Halos that? We're going to talk all about that on today's show. It's time to get locked on with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And John and I thank you for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Every show is free and available on all platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And the best way to help us out is by giving us a rate and a review. And those watching on YouTube, make sure that you're subscribed and click that bell to be notified every time a new episode drops.
Hey, thanks for being here with us for this episode of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John. And John,
yes,
sporting the fancy Trash Pandas hat.
Oh, yeah.
I like that blue. That's good. If you're on the YouTube side, you see it. If you're on the Spotify or audio side, jump to the YouTube page just to get a look at this hat. It's a good-looking hat.
Got to rep the AA team, the best team in the Angels organization so far, right? They actually made the playoffs. Mike, as lifelong fans of this team, you and I have had this conversation many times in the offseason. Have the Angels done enough in the offseason to get themselves to the playoffs? We had hope last offseason, because there was the expanded playoffs and a third wildcard spot. So we thought, yeah, of course they can make it. Then, of course, they had the 14-game losing streak. They lost Anthony Rendon early in the season. They lost Trout for 33 games. So that did not happen in 2022. So we're asking the question, have they done enough to get there this season? And they've made some key moves. The goal, of course, is to get to the playoffs. And so today we're going to share three things with you. What's a playoff team? Are the Angels a playoff team? And who will the Angels compete with to get to a playoff spot? Mike, let's start with what makes a playoff team.
All right, let's share four things, Johnny. And the first thing is our opinion on what makes a playoff team. And I think all baseball fans would agree with this. You need strong starting pitching in the regular season and in the postseason in order to get to the playoffs and be successful in the playoffs. Starters that you can count on. Listen to this. I want to talk about the Trastros for a moment. The Astros
not the Trash Pandas.
Not the Trash Pandas, but the Trastros. Yes. Yeah. They actually had 8 pitchers start games for them in 2022, which means...
8?
Yes, which means that they
How many
knew.
Did we have? We had like 16 starts.
Didn't it feel like we had a lot? I think there was one season the Angels had, it felt like 46 starters one season.
No kidding.
Man. It just, everybody was out there. The Astros had 8 guys that went to the mound for them in 2022 to start games. 5 of their starters had at least 25 starts.
Wow.
Already, that's impressive. And then they had a 6th starter who had 12 starts. That was Lance McCullers. And then they had a 7th starter that had 8 starts. And then they had one other guy that had a couple of spot starts. But what this number tells me is that the Astros could count on their starters going out there every 5th day to make sure that they're going to help the Astros win. And that's what makes a playoff team. You know that your starters are going to go out there every 5th or 6th day, and they're going to compete for you. You're not having to find some guy in AA or single A or triple A or bring somebody up or have one of those, like you have an opener and then you have somebody fill in the gap, right? Like they knew who was going to roll out there every 5th or 6th day. And that's why the Astros are so successful. They have strong starting pitching, and it actually showed up in the playoffs, and that's why they're such a great team. That leaves a bad taste in your mouth, doesn't it, when you say that out loud? But that's the first thing that makes a playoff team. Strong starting pitching in the regular season, which leads to strong starting pitching in the postseason.
Yeah, the second thing that makes a great playoff team is consistent bullpen performance, Mike, in the regular season. Good example. I hate to say it, but they're in our division and we got to take a lesson. The Mariners had 6 pitchers who appeared in 60 games or more. Of those 6, 4 pitchers had an ERA lower than 3. Last year, when we were doing the Super Halo Brothers pod, we had Cameron from Mariners Trident on Instagram. If you're a Mariner fan and you're here for some reason, go follow the Mariners Trident because he posts some great content. He said that when the bullpen comes in, you better be okay with the score because it's not going to change when the Mariners bring in their bullpen. And he's been right. Listen, all 6 of those relief pitchers had a whip of 1.1 or lower, with the lowest being 0.7 from Paul Sewald. That means 0.7 of a person got on base each inning when Paul Sewald came in to pitch. So the bullpen for the Mariners was pretty shut down last season. Locked down, shut down. They shut the door, whatever you want to say. That's what the Mariners had.
It did feel like when we were playing against them that we had 0.7 of a team because that bullpen was really great. Well, actually, I think we did have 0.7 of a team with everybody hurt, right?
But we won 10 games to 9 games against the Mariners.
So if you aren't a Mariner fan and you stumbled over here, just love those stats, right? Here's a third thing about a playoff team, Johnny. They are clutch. They have timely hitting, and they come through when needed. Fangraphs actually has a stat for this. They measure clutch hitting and clutch moments with a stat called win probability added, WPA. And this quantifies the percentage change in a team's chances of winning from one event to the next. So just to give you a frame of reference, a good team has a 6+ WPA. The Dodgers, John, in 2022 had a 14 WPA.
Of course they
did. Which means as the game got closer to ending, the Dodgers' chances of winning actually went up 14%. Because of their performance and because of things that took place. This could be something that they did, or it could be something where they played great defense, but mainly it had to do with their offense. Get this, the Angels in 2022 had a negative 11 WPA, which means that as the game went on, our chances of winning went down 11%, especially if it was close, because we didn't have that strong bullpen or that clutch hitting. We didn't have Rendon in there, didn't have Trout in there. So a playoff team is clutch, and they're going to come from behind, and they're going to win some games that maybe they shouldn't have won, and they're going to score a run in a really unique way. They're going to find a way to win, and this stat actually shows that, and playoff teams have high WPA.
Can I add to that in the first 2 months of the season when the Angels were really, really good, and they were 27-17, and then the losing streak happened, and we lost all hope, the Angels were a very good comeback team. I feel like they had very clutch hitting. They came from behind very often during those winning months. And if we can get that bottled version of what we had in April and May and sprinkle that through the rest of the season, all 6 months, I feel like we're going to be in pretty good shape, and we won't have a negative 11% WPA next season. Now, the fourth thing, Mike, depth in the players and the pitchers. You have to have depth. When Anthony Rendon gets hurt and your alternative is Jack Mayfield or picking up Jonathan Villar from the waiver wire or bringing up Jose Rojas from AAA, and he plays a AAA player. Actually, he played worse in the majors than he did in AAA. So, but that's neither here nor there because he is now in the KBO. So that's fine. See you later. The example that I want to point to for good depth is the fact that the Padres didn't have Tatis to start the season because he got injured and then he got suspended. So they didn't have him for the entire year, and yet they're in the playoffs. Why? Because they let Ha-Sung Kim play shortstop. They traded for Brandon Drury, who we now have. They also added Josh Bell and somebody named Juan Soto to their team. So they went out and got the pieces they needed to replace the pieces that were missing. And the one thing is, Kim was the shortstop all season long because they knew they weren't going to have Tatis. Then what do they do at the deadline? They go out and make some improvements. They get Drury to play the infield and the outfield. They get Josh Bell to play first base. They get Juan Soto because who doesn't want Juan Soto on their team to make them immediately better? And so that's what the San Diego Padres did. They added depth, they added stars, they added the pieces that they needed. And I feel like the Angels have done that because now if you have an injury to somebody in the infield, you don't go from Jared Walsh to Mike Ford. You go from Jared Walsh to Gio Urshela or Brandon Drury. Or if Anthony Rendon goes down, you go from Anthony Rendon to Urshela or Drury, right? We added so many backup pieces that this team is going to be in very good shape going into 2023. Anything else you might add to this conversation of what makes a playoff team?
I think that the manager piece is a really important piece. And we felt that as Angel fans last year with Joe Maddon's decision-making. I think it was a tweet that you sent me, and we haven't talked about it on this show, but it was a tweet about Taylor Ward's swing. And I don't remember the specifics of it, so fill in the gaps where I am leaving gaps. But I do remember, like, Ward was looking good, but then Joe Maddon was actually coaching in a different direction. Am I on the right track there? I mean,
Taylor Ward,
even if it wasn't on the right track, I want to make fun of Joe Maddon. I just want to be clear about
every offseason, Taylor Ward would go work out with a particular coach, and they would work on his swing. The video went viral because it was impressive to see Taylor Ward do his thing with the bat. And Joe Maddon went on the record saying, oh yeah, this video went viral of Taylor Ward that went everywhere, and everyone said, oh, look at this. And we were trying to get him away from that. And then the article went on to say, actually, Taylor Ward needed to do more of that because that's what made him successful in 2022. And it all had to do with the swing path and the velocity on his swing, and also the trajectory of his swing, kind of having a little bit of an uppercut. So yeah, Joe wanted to get him away from that, and Taylor needed to go toward that.
Well, coming up on Locked On Angels, are the Halos the kind of team that we just described? We'll talk that through in just a minute. Locked On Angels is brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to the college bowl season to basketball season. We've got it all at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts.
We want to thank you for making Locked On Angels your first listen. And for your second listen, you got to check out Locked On Sports today. In just 22 minutes, you can get a recap of all of last night's action and games, the biggest stories in sports. You can go behind the scenes and get insider info with local experts that only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today is available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, so we're talking about the Angels and their potential of making the playoffs. We've just described to you what a playoff team is. It's a team that has great, consistent starting pitching. They have consistent bullpen performance, timely hitting, clutch hitting, and they have depth. They know that they can count on their bench pieces. So let's take each of those 4 points, John, and let's talk through what the Angels actually look like. Why don't you start us and talk about our starters?
Yeah, we pointed to in segment 1 that the Astros had 5 pitchers get 25 starts or more. And there are certainly some starters that you can count on in this Angels rotation. Shohei Ohtani, obviously. Tyler Anderson, a new addition. We got Reed Detmers, Patrick Sandoval, Jose Suarez, and then there's still the question of a 6th starter. Maybe it's Griffin Canning. Obviously, we're not going to get Nate Eovaldi because he just got signed to the rival Rangers, which I'm a little bit bummed about, not only because we didn't get him, but now he's on a rival team.
Exactly.
And their rotation is going to be very, very solid.
And his contract's pretty good too.
The contract was more than affordable.
Yes.
Each of the guys, other than Suarez, had at least 20 starts. Actually, Suarez had 20. So each of these guys had 20 starts. Each guy had 25 starts, with Anderson leading the way with 30. So everybody other than Jose Suarez had at least 25. And Tyler Anderson's coming to this team with 30 starts. And that's also going to change because of the 6-day rule that the Angels are going to follow. So yes, we need starters that we can count on. And this season, we're primed and ready to have them. Still got to answer that number 6 starter question, but we'll see how that goes. There's still a lot of offseason left. Still a lot of free agent starters out there as well, Mike.
Do you think that they're looking to maybe count on somebody in-house like a Griffin Canning or a Chase Silseth? There's a part of me that thinks that there is something that we as Angel fans don't know, and I'm going to lean positive in this direction as we talk about this, but I wonder if they're really high on Griffin Canning and really high on Chase Silseth, and that's why they haven't gone and spent the money on a starter, because why spend the money if you have this guy coming back who's fully healthy? Or why spend the money if you have a Chase Silseth who looked really good in his first few starts and was fantastic in Double-A? And there'd be no point in keeping him there because he's already proven that he can dominate because he was undefeated there. So are you leaning in my direction? Or are you thinking that there still needs to be a move and that they need to get another arm for that starting rotation?
I think they need another arm for the rotation. And at this point, I think that Michael Wacha is a great option. I know that they were looking at Corey Kluber. Even Johnny Cueto is probably an option. Somebody that isn't going to be the frontline guy, but somebody who could be a 4 or a 5 that would slot in very nicely. Wacha had himself a very quiet, successful season last year. I know the underlying numbers say that he might not be able to duplicate that again. However, I think that having a reliable arm to go out there and perform for you each day is important. Griffin Canning coming off of injury is still a question mark for me. I know that he has the stuff. His pitching repertoire is very solid. I think his biggest issue is the separation he needs to get on his slider and his fastball because they're too close together. And then I think about Chase Silseth, who did look good, but I think he's still too young. I still think that another couple of starts, maybe a few months in AA would serve him well before he came up as a full-time member of the rotation. Now, if he's number 6 and he's a number 6 guy, then he's perfectly capable of doing that. I just think that in terms of development, that guy could use a little bit more time to gain some more confidence, maybe go on another undefeated streak and have a couple of months under his belt. So I am of the opinion that the Angels should go out and get themselves another starter, bump Jose Suarez down to number 6, and that way you can pitch Shohei every 6th day rather than every 6th start, and get him a few more starts and not have to count on number 6 as much as you would 1 through 5.
All right. We also talked about how a playoff team would need consistent bullpen performance. And so the Angels have added to their bullpen, a guy named Carlos Estevez is a new addition. He had a 1.1 whip, John, in Colorado, and on the road, he was actually under that.
Wow.
And was better. So he's a good guy that I think will probably end up maybe being at the back end of our bullpen. Maybe not initially, but I think maybe Jimmy Herget actually holds that role for a bit, but I could see Estevez being our closer.
I know Estevez wants to be a closer. I know that he wants the chance to compete for closer. He certainly has the stuff. And here's what encourages me. The break on his breaking balls is much better away from Colorado, and it has everything to do with the altitude. And it's insane. If you go to Baseball Savant and look at Carlos Estevez's numbers, you'll see the difference in the break of his slider or his changeup. Like, you'll see a dramatic difference between pitching in Coors Field and elsewhere. And it has everything to do with the altitude. So Carlos Estevez is going to be a much better pitcher away from the Rockies and better with the Halos this season. Mike, Aaron Loup had a good season prior to the Angels season. He had an ERA under 1 coming out of the bullpen for the Mets. And then, he had a fine season with us. I mean, it started out pretty bad. It was not the Aaron Loup that we expected. A lot of that, I think, goes back to your comment about management. And I think that guys like Aaron Loup and Ryan Tepera, you'll talk about him in a second, were mismanaged and overused.
Agreed.
And Joe Maddon's bullpen usage was all over the place. Guys didn't have consistency. They didn't have an idea of when they were coming in, or they would come in with guys on base and have to get out of jams that somebody else left on. Phil Nevin handled the bullpen much, much better. And the numbers don't lie. The numbers back it up that Phil Nevin's management of the bullpen was much better. So hopefully with a fresh start this season, Aaron Loup can have a bounce back year.
And if you look at Loop's stats from the previous years, he's always had a really good year, and then he's had a mid-year, and then he's had a good year, and then he's had a mid-year. And so this would be the good year. And so I think that we'll actually not the tires, right? They're not sponsoring the show, but I think that actually we could see Aaron really bounce back. And I also think that Ryan Tepera could bounce back. And I say that with this caveat. He didn't actually have that bad of a year.
Wasn't that bad,
He had his 3rd lowest whip in his career last year. And so, again, your point is that the manager is the one that really helps these guys to be successful, give them the opportunity to be successful. And I think with Phil Nevin, we're going to see that. Plus, we've got guys like Austin Warren and Andrew Wantz and other guys like Ben Joyce that could potentially come up. C-Rod, we've talked about Eric Torres from the Trash Pandas. I think that this team has a great shot at being really consistent in the bullpen. And I don't think we need to go and grab every free arm that's out there to try to fill in the gaps, because for once, the Angels actually have a lot of gap fillers that could be called up, or if they just stay healthy, they could fill those gaps and we could have a really consistent bullpen in 2023.
We talked about the fact that playoff teams have timely and clutch hitting. They come through clutch when it matters the most. And 2 weeks ago, we actually had an episode about how Trout and Ohtani and Rendon are really actually pretty clutch, especially with runners in scoring position. We gave you their numbers. The key was getting runners in front of them on base, and they didn't have a lot of that in the last couple of years. So you can check out that episode. In fact, if you're on YouTube, we'll link it up in the corner somewhere. And if you're listening on the audio side, go back and check out the clutch episode, because we really dive into the numbers there and you'll be surprised.
Yeah. Now, the fourth thing that was really important for a playoff team is depth. And that's the thing that Perry Manassian has really addressed this offseason. We have 5 quality infielders, John. They have major league experience. Urshela, Fletch, Rengifo, Drury, and Velasquez. Here's who we're running out last year: Duffy, Wade, Ford, and Gosselin, right? And then I didn't even mention VR and some of the other guys that we brought in.
Yeah.
And then there's also the one I didn't mention that actually is pretty good is Levon Soto. I think he actually is a really good major league ball player. So it'll be interesting to see. I would even see him maybe flip-flop with Velasquez on the depth chart just because of the offense that he produced. I love Velasquez's defense, by the way. And then our team in the outfield has depth with Renfroe, Trout, and Ward. We can back them up with Drury and Urshela. Plus, Joe Adell is on this team. Mickey Moniak is on this team. Bottom line is that it feels like this team is primed for the playoffs. We've got great stars, obviously, with Trout and Ohtani, and we have really good role players that help this team to create depth. So I'm really believing that this team has a shot at being a playoff team, but not just squeaking in, but actually riding the momentum of this offseason into the regular season and being a team that's competing all year long.
Hey, Locked On Angels is brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Administration. Look, we know that Christmas is over, but there's still New Year's coming this weekend. The holiday season is happening, and you might be hanging out with friends and having a few drinks, and sometimes a few drinks becomes a few too many. And as the evening comes to an end, you might think about driving yourself home. You've said your Happy New Year's, you're ready to go home, but please think again, because you might be thinking, what's the worst that could happen? And the truth is, every one of us knows the risks of driving drunk, and the results are often tragic and deadly. However, that doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. And that's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads. It's to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, please think again, play it safe, plan ahead, get a ride, have a DD, get an Uber, get a Lyft. There's no reason to drive yourself home drunk on New Year's or any other holiday, because it only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. So remember, drive sober or get pulled over.
In our last segment, as we talk about what a playoff team is and are the Angels a playoff team, we believe that they are. Now we're going to wrestle through who we're going to have to compete against, because there are some really great teams in the AL. John, there's some really great teams in the AL West, and I think that's really going to be a competitive division. In fact, could it be that we see all of the wildcard teams come out of the AL West? That might actually be a possibility, right? So last year, the Astros won the division, and then the wildcard teams were the Jays, the Rays, and the Mariners. The Rays won 86 games. We did an episode where the Angels, we found 13 games where the Angels could have won to get to 86 wins. I think with the moves that they've made, getting to 86 wins will be very easy for them to do. Yeah. And then there's early predictions on the Orioles being in the hunt, and of course the Texas Rangers. They've added DeGrom and Evaldi, and they've really made their team a whole lot better. And so a couple questions that we want to wrestle through together. The first one is this: What will be the win number for the third wild card team that maybe we will need to get in order to get in? Will it be 86? Will it be higher than that? Will it be lower than that? What say you, John?
If it's going to be that third wild card spot, I'm feeling like everybody who's going to be competing for that spot has improved in some way. And so I think it's going to be a little bit tougher. I think it's going to come down to about 88 games next season. So that's pretty high up there, but I think it's going to be a competitive wild card race come playoff time. And so, especially if the Orioles are in the hunt now, they came very, very close to getting that third spot. The Rays always seem to find a way. The Jays are going to be tough. Mariners got better. And I think, Mike, even the Rangers are going to be in the conversation this season.
Agreed.
I know their offense isn't quite there, but their rotation is looking very, very good. And I think that that's going to make them even more competitive. Even though they weren't great last year, I think that they have taken a step up. And so while they may not be in the race for the wild card, maybe they're taking wins away from wild card teams. So I think it's going to take probably 88 games to get that third spot.
Wow. So the Angels won 73 last year, which means that we have to find 15 more wins this season.
We can't go on a 14-game losing streak.
We can't go on a 14-game losing streak, right? And that's a good point. If we're going to try to find 15 wins, John, we're not going to lose 14 in a row again, right? Are we? Are we?
No, they're not going to lose 14 in a row because a lot of that was bad management. A lot of that was bringing in bullpen pieces at the wrong time. Look, when we did our episode about the 13 wins the Angels should have won, a lot of them came from that losing streak. They were games where you put guys in impossible situations. You bring in guys like Juan Lagares to play the outfield, and he causes 2 errors in a game, and it cost you a game against the Blue Jays. Like, that kind of stuff can't happen. It won't happen with the level of depth and talent that we now have. And we've said this many, many times. We have the superstars. We have the pieces. It's all about the replacement pieces. It's all about filling out the middle tier of this roster. And again, if you lose a Taylor Ward in the outfield, you don't drop immediately down to Juan Lagares from the bargain bin. Now you have some backups. Now you have some options. You can run Brandon Drury out there. You can put Joe Adell out there, Mickey Moniak. Guys who, like, in terms of Adell and Moniak, still have a lot to prove, but are definitely going to give you more than what you got with some waiver wire pickup. So we are in a much better position to win, and I don't think we'll go under 14 in a row. We won't lose 14 in a row games this season.
The Angels fandom just took a collective deep breath and they let it out when you said that. And you just made a really great point. And I would love to just keep repeating that point, because there are a lot of people that are like, oh, come on, how come we didn't get this guy or that guy or the superstar or this or the pitcher, right? We have the pieces that are going to help us win, and we've added to that. And now we're not going to have to rely on somebody that wasn't on the team at the start of the season to try to help us win a game. And you're going to have somebody that's going to be a part of this team from spring training, which is a key piece to a playoff team. Johnny, if you were to rank these 4 things that will be factors in reaching an 88 plus win total, how would you rank them? Health, pitching, bullpen, or superstars? Where would you put them, and what order would you put them in order for us to get to at least 88 wins?
Well, our starting pitching has to be first and foremost the most important thing. And that's why I still think it's important for the Angels to figure out what this rotation is going to look like going into the season. Now, the second one, I'm going to combine stars and health, because we all know that our stars, Mike Trout and Anthony Rendon, haven't been healthy the last 2 seasons. And without them, we fall into a pit, and we need them to be healthy and to play at least 130 games. I mean, we're going to have this conversation later in the week, but still, these guys need to be there. Obviously, bullpen is always important, but if somebody's not cutting the mustard, I feel like the Angels have a lot of people in place to replace them with that are competent, that are capable. We're not running out the same guys because we're low on arms. I think that the Angels have a ton of depth in terms of the bullpen, and that's something I'm actually excited to see this season.
Okay, so big question, and you can rank it here. 10 being absolutely the Angels are a playoff team, and 1 being they are far, far from it. What number so far would you give Perry Manassian and the organization? Where would you place the Angels in this playoff run, being competitive for the playoffs? 1 to 10, 1 being confident, 10 being confident, 1 being not confident.
I'm going to give them an 8. And the reason why is because to get to a 9 or a 10, there's still some questions that need to be answered and some things that I feel like they need to address. We need to know who number 6 is going to be in the rotation. We need a clear plan for the shortstop position because right now they haven't said who's going to do it. The assumption is David Fletcher, Rengifo, Urshela, Soto, that sort of thing. But we don't have a couple of clear answers that need to be answered by opening day that are still up in the air. Maybe even before that, maybe even by spring training. I think that they can get to the playoffs, Mike. I don't think that they're going to compete with the Astros. I think that will be competitive, but if anybody thinks we're taking first place in the AL West, I don't think that's going to happen. What I think is going to happen is we're going to squeak in with a wild card spot. Now, I believe they could get the second spot. I think that they can definitely get the third spot. We're in much better position to do that this year, but I don't think they're going to get first place in the AL West because it is very competitive. However, this is a team perfectly capable of reaching the playoffs. Now, when they get to the playoffs, that's another question entirely, and maybe we can talk about that later. But I think as far as the regular season goes, this team can get there, and my confidence is an 8 out of 10 in that fact.
Let's take it one step at a time, right, Johnny? Thank you for making Locked On Angels your first listen today. Now, for your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. They share some of the biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and of course, the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, be sure to get at us at Locked On Angels on Twitter and at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. I don't know if you saw, Mike, but on Super Halo Bros on Instagram, I jumped on with Around the Diamond. They are doing a fundraiser, a trivia fundraiser, baseball trivia. It's been a lot of fun. My mind went blank during the first round. So unfortunately, I'm now in the losers bracket. I'm sorry.
Under pressure.
I'm sorry to let you down. I couldn't remember Joe Musgrove's last name. I knew it was Joe Musgrove. I just couldn't get Musgrove out of my head. So get at us on Instagram at Super Halo Bros. And again, on Twitter at Locked On Angels. Mike, what do we have on deck for tomorrow's show?
Well, you mentioned it in the last segment, and it was health. Are the stars going to be healthy? So we're going to take the 3 top stars, Trout, Ohtani, and Rendon, and we're going to ask this question. How many games will our stars actually play in 2023? We're going to discuss that on Friday on Locked On Angels.
Yes, Friday's show is going to be the last episode of the week. And then we'll be back to Monday, Wednesday, Friday starting next week. So we hope that you'll join us for that. Until then, we look forward to having you back here on Locked On Angels. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
That's going to do it for this episode, and we'll see you back here on Friday.